Hi, welcome back. Thanks for joining us on our ever-deepening journey into source life, into the classical call of the source reality of being, of infinite being calling upon us to come to be, into the source. And in this 21st meditation, guided meditation, so please don't think of this as information. We've seen that we've been in the information age. We've talked a lot about that for, let's say, 3,000 years. And our great teachers have been calling us to go deeper. It can be disinformation. It's an adolescent form of rational thinking and word processing, and calling us to step and mature into an integral, holistic, tapping the source in the I-thou space. And we've seen that there is a matrix, there are multiple matrices. There's a fundamental matrix or code or covenant or logic, mind operating process, motherboard. Many words for the same, how are we using our minds? Mentation is a good word, not just mental, but mentation. How are we using our minds to make our worlds and our lives and our realities? We are not usually aware that we make our worlds with our minds. We co-make our realities with how we use our minds. We are as we mind is one of the great formulas. And we've seen that our great teachers have been calling us, and being itself, which is infinite, unified source of all realities, all words, all narratives, all perspectives, all ideologies, all cultures. Everything is coming out of the source. And source science is requiring the code that our great teachers have been pioneering through the ages. And we've been suggesting that we've been hitting a wall and not realizing it, the matrix that have been dominating us. We've been living in a matrix that has been holding us back from fully blossoming in every aspect of our lives. And we've called that, it's a smotherboard. A motherboard can be a smotherboard if we're not tapping into the genuine source board, the source matrix. And that is really the call of the journey into source. It's life and death. Because we've been seeing in the last meditation that when we're cut off from source, when we're desourced, we're going to be broken in some fundamental way, ontologically. And that's a big word for us in our journey, because the journey to source is the journey to being, and being is ontos, ontological, the science of being. And we've suggested that source science, the missing science, the first science, the science of all sciences, the queen of the sciences, in ancient classical thought, we're looking for the DNA of being. If we can get the code of being, the helix of being, the grammar of being, we would have the code for all other forms of our lives that come from being. We're always within being. So source ontology is the science of all science, and we call that, and there's a medicine that comes with it, because when we get into the source lens and open the source lens, we could see our human condition in a more deep way we couldn't see it before. And we could see the matrix that has, we're calling a smotherboard, that is an I-it, information-based, objectifying, put it in the box, caged form of thinking that worked for us in our early stages of development, but we've reached a point where we've got to upgrade to a higher operating system, a higher matrix, the source matrix, a higher code, a covenant, a source covenant. And it's life and death in our survival and thrival. And so the visual behind me, which I've suggested, captures 3,000 years of our evolution to source. And the double brackets, as we've seen, marks the matrix of the I-thou, the infinite unum pluribus, unified space. It's a calculus, it's a logic, it's a science to get into the code and tap the source of being. And words at that level, language, words, reason, thought, cognition, everything in that unified space is so interflow and interconnected because it's an infinite connected unum force that we can't use our ordinary ways of thinking to access it. And our ordinary codes of life that are information-based are not powerful enough and mature enough to handle the interconnectivity of the source field. So our journey into source life, which is being called by all our great scriptures and enlightenment and wisdom teachings of the ages, is to come into being. And that is source ontology, deep ontology, the missing science. We've been suggesting all in our journey to this 21st meditation that there's a missing science, a fundamental deep science of deep ontology. And it has a medicine. It gives us a deeper medical understanding of why our lives can be broken if we're desourced. When we're cut off from source, it's a serious matter. It's life and death. And we have been cut off by the mind-operating matrix that we've been living in and holds us captive. And we're not free-range beings. We're captured in that space. All of us, all good people, in our best science, in our best genius, in our best work of innovations, we're still, with all of our advances, still laboring under the motherboard matrix, motherboard, the I-it way of thinking, information-based, and not going into the I-thou, into the flow where words come to life. In the box, in this motherboard, everything is inert. It's an object. It's an it. We itify ourselves, and that's our teacher saw. That's dangerous. That's dehumanizing. It's a source of all kinds of pathologies and violence. And that takes us to the theme for this ever-deepening journey. We're going to see that if we're desourced, and we are, then every aspect of our life will be showing signs of being desourced, broken from being. So I'd like to accentuate that the missing source science, entering into the source with a code, I am code, when we come to awakened mind and awakened reason and tap the source directly and can't stand outside of it, but are flowing I-thou with it. I-thou means the other is not, you can't objectify it. The thou is connected with the I. The I and the thou are interflow. Whatever it may be, whatever the other, whatever I perceive, whatever I conceive, whatever I encounter is another nature, is connected in interflow. And we can't sever it and put a space and slash it between us in the I-thou space. So we're living in between two great matrices, the I-it motherboard that can be a smotherboard and smothers us from our life and our flourishing and from our being, and the fundamental source board, the motherboard, the code, the covenant. That's the missing code of awakened rational life. And that's where we thrive and come to our full humanity. And we've been seeing in this visual that we cannot step outside of the infinite field represented by the double brackets. This is just rehearsing where we've been to just remind and start up this meditation. And that with all our human development, we're in a matrix. Here's the matrix, the symbol of the matrix, which cuts us off. The matrix cuts us off from access to the source. This is where we have the deeper matrix, the double bracket matrix, is where everything is infinite interflow and connected and unified. Everything. We can't break it apart. It's not just a space-time continuum. It's mind and time and word and cause and every item in this mind and body. Everything is interflow. I and thou, me and you, different worlds, different scriptures, different names for God. They're all connected. Yahweh, Allah, Om, Brahman, Tao, Buddha nature cannot be divided because of the infinite Unum, infinite unity. And that's the space. So whether we're here or here, everything is always interconnected. But here, the circuits get broken. We desource. And we use a calculus here. We use a way of thinking, information. This is the box I'm suggesting is where culture has been unfolding, primarily here. We're always connected indirectly with the source. We can't step outside of the source. We can't push the infinite away. The infinite is always right here in every breath. We've seen that over and over. But still, somehow, this is the technology that dominates our culture making across the planet. And it cuts us off from the source. And the greatest journey of our wisdom medicine is to call us to make the crossing from this dysfunctional space into awakened dialogue flow of awakened, compassionate, moral, spiritual, scientific, cognitive, rational life in this space. I and thou. Everything, that's when you get to be mature in science and medicine and aesthetics and ethics and reason in that I-thou space. So what we suggested last time is medical ontology. This science here is the missing science, and from this space we could see the human condition here, and see that this motherboard, which cuts us off from the source, is the main and deepest medical source of human dysfunction, of our cultures here. Our cultures are here within this space. And all of our information and narratives and worlds and how we use our minds and reason and intelligence and our worldviews or culture, all of them are going on in this cultural space. It's a technology of how we informationize and make sense and meaning and have our truth and knowledge, and all of that's going on here. And our great teachers calling us to this space were medical ontologists. Moses, Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, Mohammed, Jesus, they're calling us, they're medical ontologists, meaning they're seeing that this is bad medicine. This line cutting us off from connectivity with reality, with being, right? If our being is busted, that is a medical pathology. Ontological pathology. That's a word I'd like us to focus on, because whatever names we have for our human dysfunctions and pathologies, and we have a brilliant, amazing diagnostic in medicine, and there are different medicines. There's acupuncture, there's Ayurveda, there's naturopathic, there's allopathic, scientific medicine. There are many medical narratives going on. There's psychiatry and psychotherapy and cultural critique and diagnostic, economic diagnostic, all of these diagnostics here of what we see as dysfunctional. The source medical deep ontology is saying if you're cut off from being, this line, and in this matrix, you're going to see dysfunction and pathologies, which are ontologically based. To be desourced, to be cut off from being, is a deep, serious medical condition. And when we're desourced with the matrix, this motherboard that's holding us, all aspects of our lives. This is where we left off in the last meditation. It takes us some time to get going because this is a different way to think. We haven't had the words medical ontology before. I'm suggesting that's a new word. We haven't had source science brought to the fore. It was latent. It was bursting through in many different ways, but we're bringing it to full articulation by getting the access code, the missing source code, the double bracket code that opens up the missing logic that allows us to see the unum pluribus, the infinite connectivity, the vast, boundless diversity, yet connected in infinite unity, and therefore everything must be interlaced at every level. It's fractal. That's the word. Fractal is an infinite interflow of connectivity and relations, and we can't use this way of thinking to access that. So what we've been doing is when great teachers and medical ontologists who are seeking to migrate humanity to the higher ground, again, the Moses and Socrates and Buddha and Krishna, Lao Tzu, Muhammad, for example, these are early examples. They've been seeking to call us to surrender to Allah, to put Yahweh first, to follow the laws of Yahweh, right? The logos in the flesh, all of these talk to yoga is to let go of the samsara. The yoga is to move into this space. The Zen is to be in the mindful. This is mindful technology, the double bracket. So all of these great medical ontologists are calling us to be. Well-being is happiness, is flourishing. And if our being is broken, then we have to treat it with ontological medicine. So that's medical ontology, source science. And source science, because it's speaking from this space of infinite unity, is integral science. I know we want to get integral science here and connect physics and chemistry and biology and computer science and mathematics and the various sciences we have. We want integral science, but you can't get integral because this is a disintegral space. You cannot get integral wisdom, integral intelligence, integral healing. Anything integral is here. Because this is integral is unum, and unum is when you leave the divided space because things here are divided. And we've gone into that several times in our earlier meditations. And as we go deeper beyond this one, we will spend some more time seeing why is it that this motherboard, the single bracket technology, that matrix cuts and divides and polarizes and slashes units and items. It creates units, like atomic pieces, like Lego blocks that have to be synthesized artificially. So any relationship here in this matrix is artificially synthesized. We have relations. We have love. We have human relations. We see connections. We make links here, but they're artificially synthesized by us as we use the technology to put the pieces together. Whereas in fact, when you go into the deeper space, it's always already in an organic flow of relation. I thou is an organic flow, unbreachable. But the I-it space cuts it artificially. And we begin to discover the relations in nature as we do our science and our common sense and make links all through our lives and human relationships within ourselves. These are all links we're making and discovering because they're infinitely held in the deep space. So relationships here in this motherboard are not the same as love here is not the same as love here. Love is a deep interflow, interconnection between the lovers, a deep ontological intimacy between the others. Father and daughter, father and son, husband and wife, marriage here is a deeper engagement of intimacy, ontological intimacy, than in the I-it space where the other is objectified by the information motherboard. That's been dominating our cultures for centuries. It's not new. We didn't enter the information age in the age of Google. That was just a more developed acceleration of what's always there, information. And we informationize all of our lives are informationized, and we make ourselves as information bits because we process ourselves here as well in the information space. And when we make ourselves an object here, we cut ourselves off from our true self. And that's an ontological ailment. Our great teachers saw that. And we cannot flourish when we're cut off from our high self, from our ontological being, from our being, when we're cut off from our being. When our existence is cut off from our being, we have an ontological medical crisis. So I think it's very important to see that wherever we are within our current cultural diagnostic, all of the diagnoses and pathologies that are familiar with us and the new ones that are being named all the time, brilliant, it's great work, keep doing it, that's fine. I'm not saying to stop it, but realize that when you go into source medicine, into medical ontology, into being, the language of being, and get the access code to that deep space, where everything is interconnected, the language of being, that's medical ontology. And the basic insight of all of the breakthrough to medical ontology is to see that when we're desourced and cut off from being, we're going to be in deeply, chronically entrenched, endemic, systemic, broken pieces, and we're going to feel it. And because the infinite source is always calling us in our deepest being, we're always being called by the double bracket infinite source. It's pulling on us. So we know that something is missing. We're being called to be who we are. We're being called to awaken ourselves and come into our high culture. And that's operating 24/7. That's the call of being. And we don't know how, if we don't have the source code language, then we don't know how to respond, how to articulate it, how to go through the front door. And so we suffer from that. We try to find ways because we know something is lacking, something is missing, being is missing, myself is missing. We went AWOL, we're eclipsed from ourselves. And when that's the case, and our great teachers saw that's the case, we're going to find all kinds of strategies in our everyday life here to identify it and speak to it. We're trying to fill the void of our being, to fill the space of the missing self by trying, whether we medicate ourselves to find a way to appease and alleviate the angst we feel and the emptiness and the despair of loss of meaning, of being, of what is authentic and real. When we feel the loss of that, we're going to do anything in our power to fill it. Fill it with, I want fame, I want celebrity, I want money, I want sex, I want love, I want recognition. Whatever, it becomes compulsive and impulsive. And Buddha, for example, saw that. That's an addiction. It's an existential addiction. Existence is suffering. That was Buddha's medical ontology. Buddha is a medical ontologist. And if you think of Moses and Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and Lao Tzu and Socrates, for example, as opening up medical ontology, realizing we've got to get to our being. And when Buddha awoke, the awakened enlightenment of Buddha here, he gave the noble truths of source medicine. Existence is suffering, being cut off. The samsara cuts us off from nirvana. Existence is suffering, it has a cause. He didn't use the single brackets, but he saw that we're addicted to a mind-operating process that makes ourselves objects and believe we're self-sourced. But really, being is what sources us. Truth and being and reality, that's this field, is what sources us. But here, when you're cut off, we have no source. We're cut off from our source. This is serious medical condition in medical ontology. When we're cut off from our source and desourced, we're ungrounded, we're unfounded, we have no foundation, and therefore how do we sustain our culture, our lives, our stories, our narrative? We self-sustain. I am my own being. I am self-caused in some way. We displace the field, the real source, with an artificial source. My culture is sourcing me. The conventions we have, my culture is my world, is my living space. That's what's sourcing me. But then all of the cultures here being desourced and not truly sourced are going to be synthetically sourced. And that's what leads to all kinds of pathologies in the desourced life. And that's really what I'd like to take a look at. I took some time in this meditation to open up the word medical ontology, the missing science, the fundamental science, the integral science of all sciences, that is science of being, and that if we're broken from our being, we're going to have pathological dysfunctional conditions. That's the deep insight. And that means that all of our lives as we know it, to the extent that our cultures across the planet has been dominated by this matrix of an I-it world of information here and not accessing the double bracket technology of the matrix here, we'll be broken from integral flow and life and self and all of the aspects of high culture that are being called for in the deep space of being here, rather than our existential condition here. So we have multiple realities here. We have multiple worlds, multiple stories, multiple lenses of the mind. It gives us multiple stories and different worldviews and cultures and religions and ideologies and sciences and disciplines, all here. And the main insight, and this is alarming to hear this and to say it. It's alarming to say it from deep ontology, that when we're cut off from being and desourced, all life here is going to be, from the ontological point of view, dysfunctional, pathological. Right? Pathos logos is the logos. We've been broken from the logos code, and therefore we're going to be dysfunctional. And it's a deeper diagnosis than common pathologies that we name and are familiar to us. And what I'd like to take a moment to do, that is in a way unthinkable, is to think that through, because all culture, our entire cultural life proceeding in this space, all the phenomena, all of the events, all the experiences here will show the mark of being in desourced ontological malpractice. And in a way, it's not just mental illness, it's mentation. I want to give us another word, mentation. How are we using our minds? What matrix is dominating our lives? Well, that's our mentation. That's how we think. That's how we have reason. That's how we have intelligence, understanding, judgment, all of the inferences we make, everything that we narrate, our interpretations, everything, our cognitive, our epistemology, fancy word for knowing, all of that is going to be in this space. And so when we're cut off from the logos, from the code, from the source, we will see dysfunctions and fragmentations taking place in this space, because this space is inherently fragmented and polarized because of the technology and the matrix dominates. The matrix, the single bracket I-it matrix, by the law of A is A, puts everything in separate pieces, and we try to hold it together. We try to hold it together. So reason here, rationality here, is going to be in a way synthetic and artificial. It's not going to be mature organic reason. This is organic, unified, relational flow. This is inorganic, synthetic. This is like Lego blocks. This is like logos code. The LogoSapiens and the ego sapiens. The Lego, and ego is a separate being that alleges to have its own identity. That's the identity ontology. Because the law of identity is A, and everything has its identity, and every name, every word is going to be its own signature, and that breaks things apart, and we have to put it together artificially, whereas things are in infinite flow in the motherboard of the Unum science. So that's an alarming thing to hear. And that's the rest of this meditation is opening a theme that will take us 2 or 3 further meditations to really bring it out. And that's my intention with you, is to go through the range of cultural life here to see why the great pioneers, the source pioneers of medical ontology, would recognize that once we're in this space, it's like a cave. This is like for Socrates, when we're living in a cave, it's a mentation cave. So it's like a mentation illness, not mental illness, that's very narrow. When we say we have mental illness in psychiatry and psychotherapy, right? But mentation is how are you using your mind? If you're using the smotherboard, that form of mental practice, mentation, leads to a broken world and a broken life and a broken culture. And my religious life, my love life, my family life, my political life, my economic life, every aspect of my life is going to be compromised when it's desourced. That's mentation illness. So medical ontology is running deep and it's radical because it means we have to take a critical look from source science, from this lens. We have to look into this condition. When we're living here, we can't see this condition. We have to step back into source science to see this picture. We cannot get this hologram within life here. This is new. We've not seen this before. I dare say that. We have not seen this hologram before, where we're always living within the double bracket space and matrix of the infinite unum pluribus, where all the multiplicity is united in the unum, and that's the double bracket calculus of the I-thou life, of a mature reason. This is premature reason, this is mature reason. Premature human to full mature human. I-it humans, ego sapiens to LogoSapiens. And so our life and culture here is going to be compromised. And so what I'd like to quickly do with you, and we're going to go deeper. I know I'm covering a lot, but I mean to help us see from medical ontology is going to take a look into this space and see a wide range of scattered symptoms that are effects of this motherboard that cannot be seen within this motherboard, that turned out to be desourced pathological dysfunctions. So let's do that experiment together. What's going on in our culture? Well, my life. Let's just start with my life, my personal life. If my life is here in the box and our great Buddha is saying, don't stay here, come here. Jesus, let go of this, die to this so you can be born again. Moses is calling us to follow the laws, the commands of the source, of Yahweh. Muhammad, come to Allah, surrender to Allah. Socrates, we've got to leave the sophistry of ignorance and rise into wisdom, into the Logos. Yoga, Krishna, we've got to let go Arjuna here. Arjuna is here in the Bhagavad Gita. He's in a fratricidal war. He doesn't understand that this is a war zone. It's a violent space. You've got to let this go and rise into the Om, into the Yoga, into the Unum, into the Om, which is Unum, which is flow. So if you just take a personal life, just think about it. When existential thinkers, philosophers have seen that the individual can be in deep isolation. When you're in this space, my life, I feel isolated. I feel alone. There can be loneliness, there's angst, deep existential anxiety, and fear and trembling in terms of what I'm cut off from. When Kierkegaard speaks of a leap of faith, right? These are deep issues of existential disorders, and existentialists like Heidegger and Jean-Paul Sartre are speaking of la nausée, nausea, ennui, boredom, Camus, the myth of Sisyphus, of suicide. If this is desourced, meaning is empty and dark, and life is meaningless, then what's the point of living? Why should I be in the face of darkness and meaninglessness? There's no reason to be. This is where we have meaning. This is where the lights go on of our being. But this is when we're in our existence, raw existence, in a space that can be dark. And as a human, I can just be haunted by death, the specter of death. What is death? It's an ontological phenomenon. And death is being caused by this matrix. The fact of death in my life, which I face day and night and haunts me. I'm living a terminal life. It's like life itself is an illness. Life is pathology. Desourced life is an illness. In biblical terms, it's called sin. If you're born in sin, that's another name for one name for what is a scientific diagnostic of being cut off from reality, from being. If you're severed from being and born into that, the wage of that is death. And we say, well, death is a fact. No one can deny that. Well, it's a fact for one position here. But our great teacher saw that if you could enter life, this is life, capital L, double bracket life, is different from life here. This life comes with death and brings death, and death is the result of being cut off from life. So that existential, just my existence as a being, when I'm desourced, the feel of it is a deep angst, and it spins off to all kinds of forms of meaninglessness. If meaning is being sourced, and that's where meaning turns on the lights of the logos, of reason, rational light to awaken here, but I'm cut off and I'm living in an eclipse. This is an eclipse. This is a dark space. And the most our mind can see is an artificial light and not the light of source. And so there are many existential illnesses of depression, existential, ontological depression. I'm not turned on. I'm not in nirvana. Samsara is a turn-off space. You're turned off. Your being is shut down. You're not enchanted. There's the mystery, the voltage, the joie de vivre, the joy of life. The lights are not there. We feel it. We hit a midlife crisis. That's a life crisis. That's an ontological crisis of meaning, of truth, of ethics, of being, of joy, of rational intelligence, of knowledge. All of that is what we're longing for. We're longing for source life. And that's our birth life. That's imprinted in us. We can't be outside of it. We are LogoSapiens here. But at this stage of development, we're ego-sapiens, Lego, separate pieces in artificial synthesis meaning. We have artificial light, not source light. So when you begin to think of the many different symptoms of human beings in our life, my life can be dysfunctional, pathological, from an ontological point of view. And if my life is dysfunction, and you can see a range of existential disorders, ontological in ontological medicine, right? The anxiety, the loss of faith, the loss of hope, disenchantment, nihilism, which means that there is nothing that I can trust, and nothing. There's no foundation. There's nothing I can trust, and existence is empty. That's a nihilism, skepticism, right? My knowledge gets broken. Because as good as my knowledge will be in the information box, it's not knowing. When you know in the I-thou calculus, you are one with what is known. When you know each other here, it's a different knowledge than when you know here as an information piece in the I-it knowledge. So reason, language, everything I touch is going to be, my words are broken. Words here, language, here is not the same as the beginning. In the beginning is the word, the logos, the word. This word is infinite. It flows with being. Logos, being, word, life, love, goodness, all can't disconnect it. That's the infinite word is being. But words here are broken off, and our calculus, our matrix, puts each word in its, all languages are human languages. French, German, English, Swahili, Hebrew, Sanskrit, on and on. They're all separate, broken off from source word. But they come from source word. They can't not. Because the source infinite word is making any word possible, any sign, no sign. No sign can be outside of the source sign, the holistic integral sign. So signs can be broken, words can be broken, so words can be infected. Our languages, and that's why we end up in Babel. Right? The Tower of Babel is when we are broken off from the infinite word. Our languages are self-sustaining, allegedly self-sustaining, and they're not, and that they cannot communicate across borders. We know we can communicate and translate across languages. Why? Because of the source word. If we didn't have this, if this went out, if all we had was here, what would be the foundation of translatability across widely diverse, not just languages, but worldviews, ontologies? We live in different worlds. If I live in the world of materialism, if I live in the world, the biblical world of the Christ, if I live in the world of yoga, if I live in the world of Buddha, if I live in the world of science, of Einstein, these are different worlds. And worlds are worlds apart. When we're desourced, worlds are worlds apart, and they don't know how to connect and communicate because it's artificial, and therefore we fall into broken ideologies. Ideologies come from this space. Ideologies are a system, a network of beliefs and ideas that I, or my community of speakers, in my community, like a cult, we speak that culture. A cult speaks a culture by sharing a narrative. And that belief system, that all of my beliefs that I itemize into space, if I'm following the belief in the Christ, and I have the dogmas and the belief systems that make me a Christian, that's an ideology. If I'm a scientist and I follow the dogmas that gives my science its position, that would be an ideology. If I'm, say, a citizen, an American, and I have my constitutional beliefs, and that is an ideology. Science is here, ideologies are here. When Buddha speaks, he's not speaking an ideology here. He's saying, leave the ideology, stop it. Stop the dogmas, stop the ideology, belief system, which is a domination of the matrix of I-it information. That is the source of ideologies. So if ideologies come here, and all we can have are ideologies, and ideologies are self-sourced and not sourced here, then they're going to be subjectively grounded in my belief and my commitment. I believe it, therefore it's true. So this leads to subjectivism, which means every story we have, even if I share it with my community, can be based upon subjective affirmation rather than sourced in the ground, the foundation of truth and the light of Logos and the rational light. And this is very serious. It means that, again, I'm looking at how personal life can be in shambles. Right? We have our existential breakdowns of, do I really have genuine, authentic meaning? Or is it artificial meaning? I've given myself meaning, and I've lived my whole life doing all of these things, and I feel empty. I can get no satisfaction. Something is missing. I'm haunted by death. And what's going to happen upon my death? Existentially, here, when I'm terminal, it's terminated. Whereas if I understood in source science with Buddha and Krishna and Jesus and other great medical ontologists, they're all medical ontologists, we would see that death here is not the same as death here. They speak of everlasting life, transmortal. This is mortal, and this is transmortal. So every aspect of life, I'm just developing it from starting with my life, but I'm situated in a culture which is a shared institution, and my culture has science, and it has your politics, and it has marriage institutions, education, family life, all of that's going on in my culture. And if my culture is here, then it's going to keep going with the desourced symptoms that are pathological for being grounded in being. Medical ontology. So a marriage here in the eyes of God, the eyes of God are here. Marriage, a union, unum, union, love, a union in the eyes of God in this space. To have the sacrament of marriage is to leave your separate entities, identities, and meet in this space. This is the space of marriage. For example, this is sacred marriage. And what Source has put together in Source, marriage, communion, union, let no person sever and split apart. And yet divorce is built into marriage. Here, marriage is a synthetic ritual of connection. It's a good example of synthetic. We get hitched and we can get unhitched. And therefore, we're divorced before we even get married. Marriage here comes with divorce, and there is not sustainable. That's just one example. Love is here. That's when the lovers meet. In deep ontological intimacy, our being, we discover we're other and yet we're one. I, thou is sacred space of deep ontology. It means there is infinite other. The other is other. Your lover is an other. And yet you're one. When you're in the politics, say the American political scene, we're radically diverse in our worldviews and perspectives and ideologies. And yet we're one nation, one people, we the people, under source, indivisible here. The Unum Pluribus is here. This is where you have high culture of democracy, where we have vast, boundless diversity, not ideologies, but every person is unique and sacred and diverse, and yet we can meet in the high ground of I-thou space, deep dialogue, rather than monologue. We can't dialogue in this space. This space prohibits real dialogue. Dialogue is dialogos. It's meeting in the deep space. We can have diverse ideologies here that splits us apart and leads to a breakdown in wars and terrorism and all kinds of violence in this space. But dialogue is going to the high ground. Dialogos. Enter the logos. That's the meaning of logos, is via dia logos. Go through the logos. When you go through the logos, you go to the meeting ground. This is the high meeting ground. This is the common ground of all the diverse differences and scattering and brokenness here. Whether it's in my personal life, finding love and intimacy and relationship with humans here, and overcoming the synthetic artificial institutions that we have in that space. So if you look at the life, my personal life, living in a culture and in the politics, and I go into the civic space, and it's broken. It's divided. I'm thinking of any culture, but take the American scene, for example, right now. It's clearly in trouble in the 21st century. It's clear that there's an ideological battle going on. There's a word war, not just a world war. It's a clash of worlds and cultures, subcultures. Because if the American scene is a multicultural society, allegedly, it's a global society. What global means? Multicultural. That means the inhabitants, the citizens, have different worldviews and orientations and different ethnicity and sexual orientations, and there's profound diversity. And the multicultures are multi-ontologies. So when we're in this space, we have multiple worldviews and multiple cultures. A culture is a code of a life, of an ontology, a worldview. We don't have the literacy for this sufficiently, because every citizen across the planet, every human should have some basic literacy in ontology, the fundamental missing science of being. And remember, that's been the quest of our great teachers from the start, to get to the first science that gets to the source of all other subcultures and sub-sciences. That's the source, medical science. So that as you move on from the individual personal life and all of the existential ontological dysfunctions I face and we face of meaning and truth and knowledge and authenticity and ethics and aesthetics of beauty, of connectivity, of intimacy, all of that, that's just the tip of the iceberg of my personal life. We see dysfunctions and breakdowns from source medicine. So that if we go from the personal life into the interpersonal life between persons, in the family, with your significant others, in the workplace, in the wider culture of the civic society that we're in, which involves other cultures and other religions and other perspectives and other ideologies. There's theism and atheism. And in scientific atheism and materialism, we have one worldview or subculture that may collide with someone who is in a religious world, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, on and on, of the many different religions. These are all different worldviews and different lenses going on here. How do they come together in the civic space? So the civic space can be damaged ontologically. In the American case, the American culture as a multicultural society of we the people, which is legacy is one nation under source, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, is not possible here in this technology of culture making. The I-it matrix, information matrix, which dominates. If it's a monologue technology and not a dialogue technology, you're not able to find the meeting point of different ideologies, and it's going to be fractured and broken, as everything else. That's what desourced means. Please remember, to be sourced is to be in the Unum flow. That's infinite interconnectivity of organic relationships. And that's the healthful, medically, that's well-being. That's when your being is well, when you're in the Unum unified organic relations flow. Love is healthy in this space. Intimacy is healthy. Family relations, political relations, intercultural relations, all across the diversity will be healthful here, but not here where it's inherently broken with not the resources. The dominance of the smotherboard matrix that divides, the I-it matrix divides and doesn't have the resources to connect and have common ground and common discourse to find truth and meaning and goodness and ethics in this space. So it's going to be inherently violent. That may sound harsh, that even well-meaning people, which we are, we're good folks, but if we're living in a matrix that's generating our lives and our cultures and our experiences all going on here and not in the I-thou sacred space, we're cut off from that, then we're going to be in some inherent form of violence. To use that matrix, which is a deep implant motherboard of information processing and world making and how we interpret and ourselves and events and each other, right? We're slashers. This single bracket slasher is being used in naming and relating in every aspect of our worlds. Our worlds are slashed apart. So that there is no genuine knowledge or truth, because you're going to be bound with many truths here. In this space, there is no unified Unum truth. Unum truth is here. So Buddha's truth, the Four Noble Truths, the Four Noble Truths of Buddha when he awoke and spoke from here to us here, right, are Unum truths. Why? Because they're foundational. They're tapping the being, the language of being, the language of source, the language of reality. Buddha was getting real. He says, let's get real. Existence is suffering. We're clinging to an artificial technology. We're addicted to object making and being making. We're making ourselves beings or entities. That means we're cut off from source. We have a choice, a third noble truth from here. And we can rehabilitate our minds from this technology to this. That's just an example of the Buddha. And through our 20 meditations, we've stopped to talk about Krishna and how Krishna yoga is taking the technology from this to let this go, samsara, and enter into nirvana, into the space of Om here. So yoga, many people in the culture are doing yoga here. That's an example of being desourced. Yoga is dysfunctional because yoga precisely is the technology of crossing into the Om space. Discover your body here. Discover your mind-body. You can't sever your mind and your body. You can't sever yourself from the other. You can't sever yourself from Om, from nature. It's all connected. When you're Oming, you're here. That's yoga here, not here. So yoga can be sick. It's intended to be, to have a more, to solve. Yoga can help me, I thought. Jesus can help me here, I thought, and give me a meaning of my life and salvation here. And following Torah and the Moses and the laws of God and holding it well in a fundamental way, we thought would bring me well-being and flourishing. And if I follow Allah and surrender to Allah and do my prayers and rituals here, I will be saved. I follow the Buddha here. Well, all of these are practices. This deeply entrenched technology of information basing reduces these great teachings to our terms and we blow it. If we put God here, then God is pathological. As Nietzsche says, God is dead. God in the box is not God. The Word of God is here. The Word of emerging humans here. And if we download God's Word or source word into our words, desourced words, there's a disaster in this space. So it's no wonder that our cultural civic space is inherently broken, and we can't fix it within that space. And in the political, social, political space, human interactions between cultures and between humans, we have sexism and racism and homophobia and ethnic cleansing and Holocaust and genocide and on, and terrorism, all of these things. What's causing that? What's driving ideological extremism, terrorism? It's being lodged in this space and not knowing it, not calling it out. So now we urgently want to stop the terrorism and radical ideology. But all of this here is ideology. And ideology is a kind of ignorance of not understanding how to get to wisdom, truth, science, awakened mind, awakened life, real democracy here. So democracy can be sick if it's dominated by the fragmented, polarized ideologies, and there is no chance of having we the people. There cannot be we the people. I to we is not correct because I and we are here. But how do we get from I to I am? And from we to we are? That's the journey of our human evolution that's going to take us out of this hot box of rampant desourced medical ontology ailments. So please remember, these are ontological ailments of being cut off from being. Being is ontos. And ontological medicine is well-being. And that's a missing science because you need the code. And our great teachers and pioneers have been opening that code. But we need to disentangle the single bracket from the double bracket to see it. And if we can't see it, we can't make the transition. Because if these two are compressed, which is where we are, all of this is squeezed in here, in our lives here. And we blow it. And to open it up, we need to expand and open up the space and say, wow, this is our journey from here to there. So that in every aspect of our cultural lives, take economics and the consumerism, where our malls are like temples of stuff. And it's not really capitalism versus communism. I mean, Karl Marx, Das Kapital, and we have capitalism as one way of dealing with goods and resources and managing our money and the flow of our and distribution of our resources, in the laws of money, economics. But there's logonomics, a logos value. Our great teachers saw when you live here, this is wealth. You could have billions hoarded here, but it's still not wealth. Because wealth is your connection with being, with value, with truth, with love. Can't buy me love. You can't buy me love. Love is here. So a person with less money here, egonomics. Egonomics is not logonomics. So we fall into a kind of neurotic need for stuff and have stuff and new stuff and the latest fads and pile it on. I want more money. I need more money. It's a compulsion. We can have economic malpractice and economic pathologies in our false attachment to stuff and thinking that having more stuff and hoarding more and using more resources way beyond the rest of the planet and we're beyond what we need. What's wrong with that? That's a pathology. To be taking nature out for our needs. What's up with that? We're trying to fill a void. What's the void? We're cut off from being, from ourselves. And we're trying to diagnose it and medicate it with different strategies. More stuff, more sex, more love, more fame, more celebrity, more power. Whatever it is that you're going after, it doesn't solve the problem because you're going to still, at the end of the day, be here facing your death and isolation. I know this is strong and this is a lot, but I'm suggesting that when you're living, and we are living, and we all are living under the sway of the I-it information smotherboard, all life and culture is tainted with a virus. We have a smotherboard virus of being desourced, and desourced means we're lacking the unified connection. And when we're desourced, we're fragmented and broken. And it's the fragmentation from ourselves. We are broken. Even my mental states, take psychology. My mental states, when being made here, every mental state has a different sentence. I am hungry, I am thirsty, I'm angry, I'm sad. All of these are mind bites, like Lego blocks, psychological Lego blocks. And our minds are choppy, and yoga is attempting to say, no, stop that monkey mind. Stop that chatter. That's a chattering mind. You have to quiet it to get to yoga, to get to Buddha, to get to Christ, to get to Logos, to get to wisdom. Enlightenment is here. Stop that noise. So this matrix, the double bracket matrix, calls us to well-being, and the single bracket matrix, it holds us captive. We're not free. And if we're not free, we're going to feel it. I want to be free range. I don't want to be colonized. But if our minds are colonized, our minds here are colonized by a matrix that's so implanted deeply in our culture. It's our culture itself as a matrix. That's using us. We're not free. And the path to freedom is to call out that motherboard and say, I see it. Oh my God. Right? And that's what these meditations say. Call out, deconflate the conflated matrix that's cutting us off from source and source word and well-being. Call it out. That's what single bracket is, calling it out. So we can see it says, wow, I never saw that. I didn't learn that in grade school, in high school, that I'm living in a motherboard that's a smotherboard, and my whole culture and life and my relationships around me and myself are somehow fragmented. I'm using a fragmenting mind operating process. We didn't get that. And so with all of our diagnostic and names of pathologies within this space, do the best you can. But what I'm suggesting is when with source science, with integral medical source ontology, you begin to see this condition and that we're cut off, and the difference between this matrix here and this matrix here. And these, it is night and day. It's like night and day. And we can begin to see, that maybe we haven't heard of Moses sufficiently, bringing the laws from the burning bush, which is up here. Maybe we haven't heard Christ, Jesus, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. That's this voice speaking. That's that's the Logos in the flesh speaking. Christ is here. Jesus, if you follow Jesus and you follow Jesus here, well, single bracket Jesus is not double bracket Jesus. Single bracket is not double bracket. For any word here, single bracket word, any word, space, time, I, you, America, any word here has an analog here. So our journey to source together, all these, now our 21st meditation is attempting to strengthen this language, to use words with the force of the double bracket. If I'm any good at this as a source teacher, scientist, then my speaking is speaking from here and not from here. And I'm calling this out to say, folks, step back, please. Listen to our great teachers. Step back and do the science. Because the science is that the infinite word is infinitely connected. And you can't get away from the infinite. You can't put boundaries around reality. Reality opens up infinitely. And when you realize that it's infinitely connected, and there everything is interflow. So when you say here all is connected, you're not getting it. Talking about it, reporting it. And channelers and visionaries and others who are seeing into this and talking here are missing the point. If you are visioning this and then translating it into this space without realizing what you're doing, you're losing the medicine of your vision. So channelers and visions and announcers and reporters and the Gospels as good news, tell the good news. It's deeper than that. The good news is here. And to go here, to follow the Christ, is to be in the good news here. This is the living gospel, the living word. These are inert, written on parchment, written on stone. Words here and scripture here written on stone is not the same as written in the heart and the mind. As a living word. These are living words and these are inert, dead words. I, it is a dead space. And I, thou is a living space. And that's life and death. So I hope you're following that all of the brokenness of my personal life, if I want meaning and value and love and intimacy and connectivity, we've got to call this out and migrate into the awakened mind, the awakened space, wisdom, the Sophia, philosophia. Philosophy is the love of Sophia, LogoSapien, whatever name you use, the God space, the Allah space, the Om space, the Yoga space, the Buddha space, here, the Tao space. I know this is strong language to suggest that the culture as a whole can be systemically and systematically pathological if it's cut off from being. But I'm saying it, and I'm not the first to say it. Our great teachers have been saying that for centuries. And we hear it with deaf ears because this deafens us. Vision here is blind to vision here. Double bracket vision is cut off and blinded. So vision here blinds us to vision. We're vision blind here. What we see, the best we can do with our rational, cognitive, mental intelligence and theory and narratives here is still not is cut off from source vision, Unum vision, global vision. This is global. All worlds come from this space. This is global mind, global vision. This is ego mind, monocentric, local by its nature. So what I hope, let's conclude. That's a lot to absorb, too much. So the force of this meditation, what's the main point? Medical ontology is a missing source science. It's an unum integral science of all sciences because it's getting to the missing code of being, the infinite word of reality. Being is reality, is source. And all of our God names come from that, but you don't have to use God names if you're inclined and you're turned off from God names. Because God names here have been a turn off. Whatever name you may use, the Yahweh name, the Allah name, the Brahman name, the Om name, the God name, all of these names here, theism and atheism are both here. Theism, atheism. You always get polar views here. Everything here, you say the is, you got the isn't. Is or isn't. You have modernism, you have postmodernism, the same box. So we're in a postmodern that says there is no is, there isn't. It's always changing, it's multiple. It's not unity, it's diversity. That's the either or space here that keeps us, it's either P or not P. And the history of humanity for the last 3,000 years has been going from one to theism, atheism. No. And you see it in the American scene, the alt-right, the alt-left. The bipartisan polar. This polarizes either or, and we get trapped here and we can't see it, and you can't. The point is we can't solve these medical symptoms here. We've got to go here. That is a very strong thing to say. Racism comes from here. Sexism comes from here. Homophobia comes from here. Holocaust here. Wars here. Divorce here. Ethnic cleansing here. All of these polar breakdown. Terrorism here. You can't solve terrorism here. You can't stop ideology here because this is ideology space. You've got to go to knowledge, to awakened mind, to dialogue, to deep dialogue. That's how you heal the brokenness of these disorders. To end racism, we've got to go to America, the land of pluribus unum. Pluribus, infinite diversity, connected in unity, one nation under source, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This is a life, liberty, well-being. As Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So 1746, I'm using the American example. We did this back in the fourth meditation, the unfinished American Revolution. Whereas we're still here and we need to migrate into the awakened American space, the civic space. And this is where we have civil health. This civics is in a civil war, a civic war. Not only a civil war of words and a word war, an ideology war, that comes with the territory. So it's bipolar and multipolar and disintegral. But to get integral, we've got to go to the integral calculus in this space. All cultures, all nations, all people, to come together as a community. You can't have community here. You can get a cult, but a cult is not a community. Located in profound diversity and respect for otherness and the integrity of the other and of the self in the I-thou space. This is a space of community. And the human community on this planet, if we're going to come out of Babel, the cultures of Babel, and come into awakened, rational, integral, unified, civil cultures, civic spaces here. So the main point I want to bring through from medical ontology is to diagnose that whatever is going on in your culture within this matrix of this motherboard, which is a motherboard that's this motherboard, it's going to have the virus. It's going to have the fragmentation virus in it, and it's a fragmentation, the polarization, because you can't have a genuine union. To be an individual is here. Here you're an individual. You're not an individual. It's divided. Yourself is broken from yourself. Your mental states are broken. Your relationships are broken. Your intercultural relations are broken. Your civic space is broken. Your education is broken. Everything is broken down and broken out, packaged. So it's a huge piece of medicine to suggest with integral medicine, source medicine, healing your being, and the calculus and the matrix here, to solve these profoundly life-challenging, evolutionary, threatening conditions. Because now, a broken civic space, the symptoms have been there all along, and they're getting worse by the hour in the meltdown of the civic space. And if that reaches a point of violence, and it's already violent, that it's unsustainable. So life here is unsustainable, evolutionary. It's unsustainable because it's desourced. And sustaining comes from source. And this is sustainable life. So all humans across the planet, in all our cultures, in all our religions, in all our worldviews, we've got to find our way to source. And you can't fake it. Right? You've got to see that everyone should be asking, am I being used by a matrix of information that makes it it, and is cutting me from myself, and I need to medically look at that because it has not been looked at? Imagine now our most gifted medical scientists now and healers, and all of the diagnostic and symptoms we now name: addiction, suicide, nihilism in the midlife crisis, anxiety, attention deficit, the fragmentation of lack of concentration, insomnia, whatever it may be. When we want to coach people into the high life, into realize yourself, if we want self-help and we are giving it in here, then that is not helping the self, the integral source self. So all of our life coaches and healers, and psychiatrists and psychotherapists and medical allopathic medicine geniuses, if we're looking at the symptoms and trying to find the cure here, we need to step back and say, wow, have I looked at the possibility that we're using a matrix that's cutting us off, and we haven't heard the medical ontology of the Moses and the Jesus and the Buddha and the Krishna and Lao Tzu and Socrates and centuries of call to being here, that we're in ill being, that this is ill being. Have I done that? Have I looked at the possibility that we're living in a matrix and caught and colonized by a matrix that's deforming the symptoms? Maybe I need to understand anxiety from a deeper place, and addiction as trying to fill a void, because we're trying to fill this space and find strategies and self-medication. So even meditation can be a self-medication here, because meditation, rightly understood, is to take us here, to quiet this, to leave this, and go here. So all of our strategies is almost a desperation and hysterical note in trying to solve our problems here. And name this, use the science, medicate it, give some a prescription of drugs for this symptom and that symptom, and the angst that people are feeling. Could it be that this being cut off from ourselves, from life, from being, is having profound medical effects on our lives? At the frontier of integral medicine, certain ingenious pioneers are beginning to see for years that how we use our mind affects our life. For example, mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness can reduce stress, and stress is a killer. If stress is not just something caused by my everyday life here, but is being generated by a smotherboard that I didn't realize was literally smothering my life, and that when I meditate in mindfulness, I quiet this for a moment and reduce the stress of existing here. Existence here is stressful. It's mindless. This is mindful. So if I can use my mind in a more integral, holistic way and get the code for being in the Buddha space, the Christ space, the Moses space, the burning bush, and enter into the laws of God in that space, and listen to the wisdom and realize wisdom, can that affect my health? Whatever diet you have here, is that diet going to help me to get whole? This is organic here. This is inorganic. Even the organic whole foods are still not whole. This is whole. This is broken. So I'm inviting our beautiful teachers and healers and medical people and psychiatrists, psychologists, look with deeper eyes at addictive behavior, at broken multiple personalities, of attention deficit, of bipolar symptoms, of borderline personalities, all of the many and brilliant symptoms that we've named. Can it be that what's at the source of this? Ask a question. To what extent is there a missing medical ontology? We've got to tap into ontos, into being. If our being is broken, that's a serious medical diagnosis. And how do we develop strategies for that? How do we heal the broken civic space, say, of America? We can't do it within the space that breaks it up. We've got to see this, call this out, and migrate into, this is how we heal it. The broken civic space becomes whole in dialogue, not monologue here, dialogue here. How do we heal a broken human, a broken life? How do we heal a broken education where it's broken into different disciplines and fields and broken out in so a way I can't find the unity and connection? And we even feel there is no connection across our many. Just take your different subjects and learn and go out and have a good life. Out here and have a good life. So we healers have to listen more deeply to look at source medicine, at medical ontology, and name the ontological the ontological pathologies. I'm introducing a word that's always there, but we need to speak it out loud. Can addiction be a sign of a medical ontology, an ontological pathology, an ontological dysfunction? The angst we feel, facing death and the fear of death and not understanding the language of death. And what if we understood death in a deeper way, according to our great teachers, would we be able to face death with dignity in a hospice? Dignity and nobility of what death means, for example. This is one example. But it multiplies to all of our symptoms. So what I'd like to do, this is a lot. Again, it just goes deeper and deeper. I hope you're able to stay with me. And thank you for staying with me on this 21st journey into source life and to see the depth of pathologies when we're cut off from source, caused by being desourced. They're medical ontological symptoms, perhaps deeper than we ever realized. And the good news of all of this is if we can name the symptoms in source science, the missing science, source ontology, if we have a science now to name and diagnose the symptoms more deeply, now we're on our way to healing. When we see that the person who's feeling in her being the emptiness of her being, she's cut off from herself, she's self-divided, that's an anguish. How do you heal that? You can't take medication, and even meditation and yoga here, and whatever practice you have is not, Jesus here is not going to, it's got to be Jesus here. It's got to be yoga here. It's got to be meditation and Buddha here, not here. On and on. So medical ontology suggests we've got to make the crossing from the matrix that breaks us to the matrix that heals us. And that's medical ontology. So what I'd like to do in the follow-up meditations, that cuts out a lot of work for us. I want to go into the depths of the civic broken space to see what does it take to heal democracy. Let's look at our economic money attachments in consumerism and stuff we need. What are we doing? Let's look at issues like death and angst and anxiety and existential dysfunctions and pathologies and ask, how can medical ontology help us to heal a life in anguish where I'm cut off and insecure, where you don't feel safe. Safety and security comes, your being is grounded. When you're grounded, you're safe. When you're ungrounded, you're free-floating. And you're trying to get it with different, more money, more this, more that, more celebrity, whatever it is. It's not going to work. So in our 20-second meditation, which will, please join me, I can see us going deeper and deeper, 22, 23, 24. So now we're 21st. This is our 21st meditation. Please don't hesitate to go back if you have the heart to do it. And I'm hoping to help you to see that this is so important. This is life and death. This is opening up a deeper access to medicine, to source medicine, to being, the language of being, and to understand our afflictions, what we're feeling in our lives, in a deeper ontological way, with the names and intelligence of ontology, medical ontology, source science, integral science, for every aspect of our life. So as we go deeper, let's look at our religious life. How healthy is our religious life? If I'm living here in this space where the heart of my religion is calling me to enter the language of space of God, to have a relationship, an intimate I-thou relationship with God, and the rituals we perform, whatever the sacrament of the wafer to take us to eat the body of Logos, to drink the wine, the blood of Logos, is here. Our rituals are meant to transport us and translocate us from being cut off to being in communion here. All our rituals are meant to take us from single bracket to double bracket life. How well are we doing that? And how well do we know some of a fundamental point that God has got to be global? The infinite God is not tribal. Allah is Allah for all. Yahweh is Yahweh for all. Brahman is Brahman for all. Om is Om for all. Buddha is Buddha for all. The infinite is infinite for all. It's all encompassing. That's the infinite. Do we know that? How well do we know that? That's an elementary point, that the infinite, my infinite God, has got to be global, which means what? All possible narratives, worlds. Do I know the double bracket Jesus? Do I know the double bracket Moses? Do I know the double bracket Allah in the Quran? Rumi opens it up. I'll meet you in the field beyond judgment of right and wrong. Meet me in the field. That's the double bracket field. That's Muslim. That's Islam. Surrender to Allah. Surrender to the source, which means to give up your stuff and enter the sacred ground, the holy ground. That's our birthright for all of us. This is not for a few. Every human being is a son of source, a daughter of source. We're source sapiens, source kids, LogoSapien kids, all of us. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thought for us to find and meet out of Babel into the high ground, in that ecstasy of mutual love and care. Imagine the planet when we're turned on. I don't have to give up my Allah. Allah is my way to the source. I don't have to give up my Moses. Moses will take us there. I don't have to give up Jesus. Jesus. I don't have to give up my science. My science takes me to the source science. So let's pause and think about that. We'll go deeper into religious practice. Can my religious life be pathological and dysfunctional because I'm cut off from the source that's calling me, the essence of it? Can I be putting scripture in the box when the word of God is deeper than I thought? Have I discovered the double bracket Jesus and God, for example? And what would that mean for my life and my community and for the planet? If we could enter into sacred spirituality of my religious life, where all of our the religions meet. Because all of our religions have to come out of the infinite source, the infinite word. Whatever religion you're practicing and confessing here, the whole point of the religion is to take us into the high ground of intimacy with the infinite. So we will go into all aspects of our culture. Education, let's look at education. I've been in education as a professor of philosophy, global philosophy, in my 50th year now and getting started, and liberal arts, and seeing that liberal arts is fragmented. They're fragmented. And to be well educated is to see the union and connection, the rational connectivity from music and logic and mathematics and science and computer science and all. They're all connected in the source. Have I found it? Do we educate our kids to see that? And when we educate, if we educate our kids here, we're slashing them and objectifying them. Is that what we're teaching in our education? Or is our education to awaken rational intelligence? As Socrates and Buddha and Krishna and our great teachers were pioneering real education here. What would that be like? To treat our kids as sacred beings, as LogoSapiens, rather than objectifying them and reproducing without even realizing it, using the smotherboard matrix, the I-it matrix, to raise our kids and generate our education and live our economics and live our politics and our religious life and our love life and our family life. We have a lot to explore. So this is just an opening, and stay with me, please. Come back, think about that, and we'll go deeper. So the next 2 or 3 meditations, it's going to take some more meditations to work this through. I will begin to go deeper into each aspect of our culture and our personal lives to look at what would it take for me to turn on the lights with the source intelligence, the code, get the source code for I am. Because I can't I am in the box. How do I do that? How do I tap the Buddha and yoga and Christ and Moses and Muhammad, on and on. These are just some names that I'm using, but all across the wisdom. Can I get wisdom and live my life? Is that for everyday people? Yes, it is. It's for every one of us across the planet. We are LogoSapiens. We're kids of Logos. And that's for all possible worlds and orientations. And our journey, our evolutionary journey, is to wake up into that and learn the literacy and the technology. It's the ultimate technology to be a human. The technology of dialogue, to be in deep dialogue with myself, with others, with nature, with the planet, with Source. And that's a sacred life. And that's the awakened rational life. Thank you so much for staying with me, and join us again when we go deeper.